Hello, my name is Rachel Locke, and welcome to this edition of KJRR Podcast. Contrary to popular belief, slavery did not end with the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. Slavery continues to this day in one form or another. Today we'll be discussing modern-day slavery in the form of domestic workers. In September 2014, a study was published by the University of Southern California's Center of Immigration Study in conjunction with the California Immigrant Policy Center, stating that there were approximately 11.3 million unauthorized immigrants in the U.S. of March 2013. 2.6 million of these immigrants are living in California, making up 10% of the state's workforce. Overall, people who have moved to the United States contribute nearly $650 billion to California's economy, or about 31% of the state's gross domestic product. Undocumented immigrants alone supply an astonishing $130 billion, which is greater than the entire GDP of the neighboring state of Nevada. Today, we are joined by Christiane Magat and Regine Hathcock, two current UCSD students, to present their latest research on domestic labor.
Hi, Rachel. Hi, Rachel. Thank you for having us.
So, tell us about your research.
Domestic labor is a concept driven from feminist theory that deconstructs the significance of the unpaid work that women do in their homes. It is commonly referred to as housework, including a form of emotional work such as intensive care and management. Domestic work around the globe is an unregulated underground economy. Many take advantage of domestic work opportunities in hopes of attaining a better life for themselves and their children. Whether or not their work is underground, and depending on many other factors such as the country, its economy, and its immigration laws, these domestic workers are risking their freedom, human rights, and sometimes even their lives. The conditions here in the U.S. for undocumented domestic workers can be very harsh. Outside the protection of labor legislation, they experience a degree of vulnerability, from low wages to abuse by employers, and many other physical and psychological injustices. For the confidentiality and the safety of the woman featured in my interview, her real name will not be disclosed. The woman was a former modern-day slave who migrated to the United States from Mexico about 25 years ago. Before migrating, the conditions for her and her family were very precarious. They barely had the things they needed for survival. Even then, transitioning into living in the United States was difficult, considering the differences in customs and language. Having had many domestic jobs, such as taking care of the elderly, taking care of children, and housework, she shares actual experiences from one of her jobs. From my interview with her, I was able to get an insight into her working conditions and her expectations.
Vivir en los Estados Unidos actualmente sí, con mucho trabajo, con mucha dificultad. Sí ha resultado ser lo que yo en un momento dado pensé. Hay oportunidades para el que desea trabajar duro, para el que quiere trabajar más de 8 horas, para el que quiere trabajar más de 12 horas. Sí se consigue a base de mucho esfuerzo, de mucho trabajo, lentamente, pero sí se va viendo los beneficios de esa entrega o de ese trabajo, de ese esfuerzo. Uno consigue los propósitos que uno se planea.
To some extent, these migrants realize the challenge coming to the United States, since they mentioned that these challenges demand hard work and dedication. Through a feminist lens, domestic work is a form of unproductive or reproductive labor created for marked individuals, or individuals who are automatically assumed incapable of naturalizing in the U.S. as true citizens.
So, Regine, what specifically makes these individuals marked?
Well, it's essentially their legal status here in the U.S. If you think about it, in order for this type of work to be created and for it to essentially benefit capitalism, this form of unproductive labor is needed to make other forms of labor, let's say higher demanding and respected forms, visible. So legal categories of citizenship affect invisibility because individuals taking on these jobs are devalued in terms of race, gender, class, etc. Those whose lives are devalued then become a commodification and a form of reproductive labor.
Would you say, considering the amount of money migrant workers contribute to the nation's GDP and their extremely low wages, that this kind of labor is expendable?
Exactly. This kind of work becomes exploitable. And the different legal categories of migrant workers, such as immigration status, behave as some sort of barrier that marked individuals must cross or somehow overcome. There are many other barriers that determine who is valued and who is devalued here. The biopower that the U.S. as a nation state has to make live or let die allows for these women to experience certain kinds of physical violence that can make it exceptionally difficult to thrive here. Here, the worker experienced a very violent situation where she was brutally abused by her employer for about an hour, resulting in 4 broken discs, a damaged wrist, and a broken shoulder. It wasn't until her husband arrived that the beating stopped and something even more interesting happened.
De los amigos que llegaron a recogerlo, no era ese, era otro hombre. Y que entra, dice el hombre, dice, ya vine a ayudarte. Yo mensa pensé que era parte de la policía o alguien que iba, porque iba de pantalón azul con camisa blanca. Y yo le digo, oh, si dice, ¿qué te pasó? Le dije, ay, es que la señora me golpeó. ¿Y por qué te golpeó? Le dije, no lo sé, nunca me dio una explicación de por qué, solo me insultaba y me golpeaba. Le digo, pues yo creo que porque no me quería pagar, le digo. Dice, oh, no te preocupes, si es por la paga no te preocupes, ahorita te va a pagar, dice, pero agarra tus cosas y vete. Ahí fue donde yo reaccioné. Le dije, ¿cómo que agarre mis cosas y que me vaya? ¿Quién es usted? Dice, oh, yo soy el abogado de la familia, dice. Así fue como me dijo, soy el abogado de la familia. Y yo le dije, el abogado de la familia, pues no, usted dice que viene a ayudarme. Usted no viene a ayudarme, le dije. Dice, lo que a ti te conviene es que te vayas. Agarra tus cosas. Y él también vio ahí ya mi bolsa con mis cosas. Intentó agarrar mi bolsa con mis cosas. Y dice, te recomiendo que te vayas. Si es por la paga, no te preocupes, te van a pagar lo que te deben. No te preocupes. Ahorita mismo te la voy a traer, vámonos. Le dije, no, deje mis cosas, le dije, no me las toque. Dice, eso es lo que te conviene, te vas a arrepentir, dice, te vas a arrepentir si te quedas esperando acá. Lo he estado tratando de superar y pues también voy mucho a la iglesia y eso también me ayuda bastante. Eso es lo que a mí realmente me ha ayudado. La psicóloga del tiempo que fui a la terapia, que psicóloga.
Even though the wife had no right to lay a hand on the worker and had no justifiable reason for her abusive actions, the therapist still defended the wife by saying that she was most likely stressed. Well, the last time I checked, being stressed does not exempt anyone from physically abusing another person. This goes back to the concept that certain people are excused for their behavior because of their status, but the same privilege would not be granted to the non-citizen.
Nomás se me iba en puro llorar y nomás me decía, no, tú no tuviste la culpa, no, es que piensa, la gente de aquí tiene muchas enfermedades, está estresada, tienen muchos problemas. Ah, y porque tienen problemas me van a golpear a mí. Y porque están estresados a mí me van a golpear. Y porque tienen sus dificultades, yo también tengo las mías, y no llego pateándolos, y no llego desgreñándolos, y no llego, o sea, eso es lo que me decía la psicóloga.
Wow, so are you saying that the lawyer, the sheriff, and the therapist, 3 different public figures who were supposed to help the citizens of society, treated her unfairly because of her undocumented status?
Yes, in addition to physical violence, women in the domestic workforce also experience psychological and emotional pain.
Los niños que cuido llegan a ser parte de mí porque les entrego un cuidado sincero, una atención como si fueran mis hijos, como si fueran parte de mí, y llega al grado en que me he encariñado demasiado con ellos y por más que lo cuido con amor, tengo que dejarlo y los patrones ya no me necesitan y me despiden porque ya no me necesitan o porque encontraron a alguien más que cobra más barato o a quien le pueden pagar menos dinero.
Not only do they experience pain from having to abandon the children of the employers, but they experience yet another level of pain that stems from becoming virtual strangers to their own family. Through this commodification of labor, these women are forced to abandon their roles of being a mother to their own families. Therefore, their love and affection are doubted upon returning.
A mis hijos les ha afectado porque ellos necesitan a su madre a su lado. para que les dé un abrazo, para que les dé un consejo personalmente. Y a mí me ha afectado no estar cerca de ellos en esos momentos importantes de su vida, en etapas o situaciones muy importantes para ellos, no estar al lado de ellos. Y aunque por teléfono les digo te quiero, te amo y les repito muchas veces, miles de veces, sé que aunque yo les repito eso, ellos anhelarían sentir mis abrazos. Ya tiene muchos años, pues ya tiene muchos años. La verdad no me gusta recordar eso porque los tuve y tuve que separarme de ellos. Me hubiera gustado nunca separarme, pero fue lo mejor en ese momento y no me es agradable.
Many of these workers come to this country because it is known as the land of opportunity. But what is the cost of these opportunities and who can actually attain them? This leads to the concept of biopower, which was a term first introduced by sociologist Michel Foucault. Biopower is a modern form of power that coexists with sovereign power and is essentially a biological explanation of power within society. It analyzes the privileges of the power and how they control who lives and who dies and what is acceptable or not acceptable within their realm of power. The dichotomy that is being examined in this particular instance is citizenship versus non-citizenship. The citizen is automatically given the opportunities, the benefits, protections that a country offers, which includes workers' rights, protection under the law, etc. In stark contrast, the individual who is not considered a true citizen is subject to long working hours of, say, 12 to 18 hours a day, working weekends, and having less protection under the law. So in a sense, citizenship status allows to live or let die. The death that we speak of does not necessarily mean physical death, but also refers to a sort of social death. These undocumented workers are not dead, but they're not living either. They are merely surviving, struggling to have the life they hope to have in the United States.
La diferencia es que cuando trabajas fuera, llega la hora en que tú sales y ahí te olvidas del trabajo, de las obligaciones, de las responsabilidades y empieza uno a vivir su vida personal. Y cuando estás dentro, lo malo de ahí es que las personas que lo emplean a uno piensan que tienen un esclavo 24 horas del día. Eso es terrible, pero es una gran realidad que se vive. Después de que sucedió eso, ay, mija, me la pasé en la cama mucho tiempo sin poderme mover, sin poder mover mi cuello, estaba todo inflamado, todo me dolía, la cabeza me dolía día y noche, y nomás se me iba en puro llorar y llorar y llorar y llorar y llorar y llorar y llorar.
This case will be brought into court on August 3rd, 2015. 4 years after the beating occurred, it is no surprise that cases such as these are put on the back burner. We hope that as her hearing approaches, she gets the justice she deserves, as every human being deserves. Thank you all for listening and to our guests who are here with us today. My name is Rachel Locke. Until next time.